this Supreme Court appeal. So the Trump administration has asked the Supreme Court to approve their firing of the head of the Office of the Special Counsel, which is dedicated to protecting whistleblowers. I think that seems key. You know, Andrew Johnson got impeached for firing the Secretary of War. Do you anticipate that the Supreme Court is going to continue down this road of adding to Trump's powers? How confident are you that they will finally put a brake on him?
Well, I think there's a couple of different kinds of powers that may get in front of the Supreme Court this term. This first case, if the Supreme Court takes this up, and right now it's there and, you know, in this emergency posture, and there are various technical barriers to them taking review of it at this point. But this is one where actually I would say the government has a stronger argument than they will in some of the other abuses of power that we've seen in other executive actions taken over these last 4 weeks. This is a case of, you know, firing a single a single head of an agency, not a multi-member commission, but a single head of an agency. And that is something that the Supreme Court has really said is within the executive powers in the context of other agencies like the CFPB, for example, and they've done that recently. Yeah. Now, it's different here, Joy, because we're talking not about a single head of an agency that regulates or investigates or prosecutes private behavior. We're talking about an internal agency that's by its very nature designed to, handle complaints of abuse of federal employees by federal agencies. So it's a very different, and it's a very different kind of agency, and it's one that when the court did hold in the Saylor Law case, that the president did have the power to fire the head of the CFPB. They did hold out the Office of Special Counsel as something different. So we'll see what they do there. But there are a number of other areas where the current president is taking action that violates statutes that were passed by both houses of Congress, and he has no authority to do that, even under the Supreme Court's capacious ruling this summer. There are times when he's violating the Constitution, separation of powers, by doing things that really only Congress has the power to do, such as withholding funding that Congress has specified to be paid for certain things. So those are areas where certainly the executive branch is trying very hard to make this powerful unitary executive argument. And I think choosing this case to be the first one to go up there was strategic on their part in the hopes of getting a win. But I'm not ready to say that in all these other areas, the Supreme Court is going to say it's okay.
Yeah, I will know that Judge Tanya Chutkan, has even thrown a little bit of cold water on some of the state cases about the federal agencies being meddled with. So, and this was one of the judges in Donald Trump's criminal cases. To go back to you, because he's doing a lot of work there, Ruth. Because the he that's doing a lot of the work here is Elon Musk, somebody who is saying that 60 Minutes producers should be in prison. They should be jailed because Donald Trump didn't like the 60 Minutes interview. This is the person who's wielding through his young staffers access to our personal data. You know, Donald Trump has unleashed his biggest donor to do this work. And the people that are being fired, including this gentleman, he was the guy who was looking out for whistleblowers. They're getting rid of the parts of the government that end corruption, or that at least try to stop corruption. It feels like there's a theme.
Yeah, well, this is part of a shift in governance culture to accommodate corruption. And that was a feature of Trump 1.0, but it's on steroids now. And in fact, we know from good reporting, because we still have a free press, that many of the agencies that Musk and co have gone after were having investigations into Musk's companies.
It's entertainment for Trump. It's
he's the president of the United States. This is a statement from the president of the United States.
I have lived through this.
Yes, you have.
And in good times and bad times, the president enjoys taking a grenade out on a Saturday afternoon, throwing it on the floor, and watching everybody react. Now, could it be a distraction? Could it be a diversion? Could it be just pure entertainment? This is what the president does.
So he's not saying the president's
and there's
above the
no
law.
downside.
Hi, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. If it's an emperor Republicans want this President's Day, maybe it's about time they just say that and drop any and all pretense, because Donald Trump sure has. Trump's first chief of staff there in his first term, Reince Priebus, dismissing what Jamal Bowie of the New York Times calls, quote, the single most un-American and anti-constitutional statement ever uttered by an American president. Trump this weekend posting a quote to social media often attributed to Napoleon. It reads, "He who saves his country does not violate any law." Perhaps more alarming than that interpretation of presidential power and its unlimited scope is that the Supreme Court, in its ruling on presidential immunity last summer, has already kind of sort of agreed with Napoleon and Trump. In her dissent in that case, provided with what she called a fear for our democracy, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote this, quote, the relationship between the president and the people he served has shifted irrecoverably. In every use of presidential power, the president is now a king above the law. So it's with a keen eye that we'll be watching the Supreme Court this week as it begins the process of further clarifying what presidential power means in this country right now. In the very first case to reach the Supreme Court arising from Donald Trump's flurry of executive actions these past few weeks, the justices will again shape the scope of presidential power in a case having to do with who Trump can fire and who he cannot fire. But Trump's mantra that, quote, he who saves his country does not violate any law, end quote, isn't limited to presidents in his telling. If his supporters, for instance, believe that to be true, what stops them from doing whatever they want?
And for the future. So that is sort of the context. The challenge here is that one of the strategies and the tactic is that all those people that didn't like it but voted for him anyway because they didn't really think these policies were real. And Reince Priebus in the intro he played is still a victim of this. They say, well, don't believe all the things he says, even though every time he says something, he goes ahead and sort of acts in accordance with it. Just trust your gut. Of course, that's absurd and ridiculous. He would never do such things. That's what a lot of people rationalize when they made this vote. But they were plain as day. This is not the first Trump time, the first Trump administration. This is the second. And that lack of popularity is both a source of strength and opportunity going forward for preserving our democratic structures. But it's a real weakness. It's a real vulnerability, because the reality is that by scaring everybody, by projecting this kind of power and that right now is not in fact there, it's still up for grabs. It's just trying to project a perception of it. We can choose to either validate it and make it so, or we can take the necessary actions to connect the dots to the harms, stiffen our spines, speak up, and speak to the very people that you identified that didn't really want this. They're, along with all of us, are going to be the source of our democratic resilience. And that's what this is about. This is about scaring everybody into submission. Heroes are heroes for a reason, because most people, when they're confronted, duck and cover. And what they're trying to do right now is not just shift the vibes, but to get all those people that held their nose or voted for Trump for a myriad of reasons, as you noted, to now be stuck. And that's we're at a critical juncture.
I mean, Frank, the most basic reading of a slide toward autocracy deploys despair and hopelessness. And one of the things about Reince Priebus that I thought, watching him talk, is he is known to have been one of the biggest leakers, calling Trump crazy, saying all sorts of things about his colleagues and about Donald Trump. And I jotted down, while he was talking, I jotted down a quick list of the things that people have said publicly about Donald Trump. He's a demonic force, said Tucker Carlson. He's America's Hitler, said J.D. Vance. He's a, quote, despicable human, said Mitch McConnell. January 6th was an act of, quote, domestic terrorism, said Ted Cruz. The people carrying out the enforcement of whatever Trump is saying are all hypocritical in that they've said worse things about Donald Trump than anyone in this program has ever said.
Yeah, we're watching Exhibit A for an unmitigated desire for power and influence and relevancy. That's who surrounds Donald Trump right now. People who literally can't get another job without kissing his rear end. And this Reince Priebus clip that you played, Nicole, nothing to see here, as Angela said. Don't worry, remain calm. He occasionally likes to take a grenade out and throw it on the floor to see what happens. I'll tell you what happens when you play with a live grenade and toss it on the floor. Eventually it explodes. And the only question for us is whether it's going to explode back on Trump or explode and hurt the rest of us. And my money's on both, by the way, People are going to get hurt, and eventually it will blow back on Trump. And then, with regard to this statement, which again, we shall not believe Reince Priebus when he says, don't worry, that someone who saves his country cannot violate a law. Okay, it's been attributed by some historians who aren't certain to Napoleon, but I'll tell you where it's definitely been used far more recently, and that's with a white supremacist, far-right extremist named Anders Breivik in Norway.
Donald's angry that this is even at the Supreme Court. The decision made to even have this here is concerning to Trump. Because, with the courts, guys, there's really a sense, you have to understand this, that presidents have probably done unconstitutional things in the past, but if nobody challenges it and the Supreme Court doesn't hear it and all of that, they just get away with it, right? It's the legal equivalent of if the tree falls in the forest and no one hears, is there an actual tree falling, right? Does it make a sound? And here it's the same thing. If the president does something and it's unconstitutional, but no one challenges it and the courts don't hear it and blah, 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 is it actually unconstitutional? Well, but it morally maybe, but certainly not on paper, because the courts are the ones that make the paper, right? And so the fact that this is even being judged is just yet another sign of the Supreme Court's exasperation with Trump. Again, I'm not defending them, but again, I've talked about how they have an evil roadmap. The Supreme Court has an evil roadmap. Or at least a very shadowy one, like from the movie Dune, the Bene Gesserit, and they're like, our plans are measured in centuries. Well, the Supreme Court's evil plan is measured in decades, because that's how long you can sit on the Supreme Court. They are more than Trump. They are about more than Trump. When Trump is 6 feet under, some of these judges will still be on the court for another 20 years, right? And so they're like, Donald, you're making our evil plans harder, because while we're willing to give you a lot, the fact that you ask for everything means you put us in the BS with you, and we're not happy about it.